Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Confident Hypnotherapist podcast. Now, this week, I'm thrilled to have Elliot Roe join me. Elliot is a world-renowned mindset and performance coach. Looking at his bio, the clientele that Elliot works with, professional athletes, Olympians, USC champions, esport competitors, Hollywood actors, high-stake poker players, Wall Street traders, entrepreneurs, founders, and executives. That's phenomenal. Elliot, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Now, I've just mentioned to you prior to hitting record that you're the only guest ever that I've had on the show where I've had people messaging me prior saying, you need to speak to Elliot Roe. And I think that's, awesome social proof in itself about how remarkable you are. But as you can imagine, I get these messages and I go back and I say, well, what is it about Elliot that would make him such a great guest? And the response that I get back is, well, you talk about confidence and mindset all the time, and there's no greater person to talk to about this than Elliot. So I guess that must, it puts you in high praise to start off with. But I guess the obvious question is, what led you down this road to mindset coaching?
Well, thank you. It's obviously really lovely to hear that people are saying that. So thank you, whoever's sending the emails. Much appreciated. So I had a fear of flying. Wouldn't do long haul trips. I sort of I would do short haul trips, but would spend, I don't know, about a week before the holiday, stressing about the flight. I'd spend the taxi drive stressing about the flight. I'd go to the beach and I'd be worried about going home. So, it impacted me a lot. And I saw a hypnotherapist who managed to resolve it in an hour using regression techniques. Brought up a memory of me seeing a picture of a small plane at my granddad's house and being told it crashed and killed his business partner. But as a very
Wow.
young age,
Yeah.
sort of explained why I was scared of flying. But what was interesting is I didn't consciously remember the memory.
Mm.
Went home, confirmed it with my mom. It was true. And for me, I was sold on hypnotherapy for there because I was comfortable getting on planes. I could travel the world. And the logic was just so simplistic to me. There was a fear. It had been generated from this situation. This person had managed to find it very, very quickly. And now I feel free in my life. So I went and trained at a hypnotherapy school. This is about 11 years ago, I guess. This was a few years after the sort of the initial situation. Um, really enjoyed the classes. Again, sort of dug deeper, more into this regression side of hypnotherapy. That's
Mm.
certainly what I specialize in and how I work. And then I started working with some amateur golfers, just locally for fun. I had a friend in the poker industry who said, if you can help people with stress on the putting green, you can probably help them on final tables of poker tournaments. And I started doing that, and poker went extraordinarily well. I had clients win over $100 million. So it was very significant. And from word of mouth there, I was introduced to professional athletes, business owners, stock traders, the sort of the list that you went through. And it sort of spiraled from there. And over the last 10 years, with me being fortunate enough to work with a lot of very interesting people in different areas, but in all cases, really just trying to help them optimize their mindset in high pressure moments.
What were you like when you started out? You mentioned you started 10 years ago. How were you as a hypnotist when you first started? What kind of roadblocks or mindset challenges did you face?
I was pretty confident.
Hmm.
Um, so I very much enjoyed the whole training process. I did one of the longer courses. So it was around a year course, did a lot of practice sessions during that year. Um, and, had a talent for making people cry. um, so,
I've been told that over time as well. It's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
a,
it's
a
like,
weird compliment.
it's a very strange skill set. So I mean, I was always from the beginning following some form of this philosophy. And we all have our moments where we have a session that doesn't go quite so well, or we question, this is a very strange direction for me to take my career. I'm now, bringing up people's emotions for a living and trying to grow a business in something where there's a lot of skepticism. So, I'm working with, professional poker players are very analytical. They're very skeptical people. Stock traders are very, like, I don't get people coming to me saying they think it's going to work. I get people coming to me saying, one of my friends said I had to try this. Seems a bit weird, but I'm willing to give it a go. Like, that's my starting point with most of my clients. So I faced some of those things. And sort of the criticism that would come on the online forums for being someone who's doing hypnotherapy in those sort of areas. But sort of over time, I think the confidence came with the results. And I was fortunate enough that a lot of very well-known people were saying that I was legitimate. So it started to become a case of, if someone was saying, why would anyone do hypnotherapy? But then the top people in the world have been doing it. It sort of makes the person making those criticisms look bad. So it was like sort of organic process of the better the results came, the more testimonials I had, the less criticism I faced, because they were then going up against very credible people in their industry.
In the earlier days, though, I mentioned when you had people come in that were analytical and that were almost, this probably isn't going to work on me. Surely there was a little bit of, no, actually, I'm putting my own judgment into this. How did you push away any of that self-doubt in those moments to let you know that you can help them?
I would say one is that I am analytical. And when I went to that hypnotherapist, I was skeptical that she could help me.
Right.
So
it's
I was coming at it from a view.
Yeah.
My experience was I walked in not expecting anything to be very useful for me. And I walked out with the freedom to travel the world. So the way that I framed it post that point, if I came someone skeptical, I'm like, of course you're skeptical. I was skeptical. Like, there's just, I think that's a rational way to approach a modality that doesn't make much sense to most people. And with all of the ways, the shows and the TV versions of hypnotherapy and the sort of the baseline, it's not shocking to me that people come with skepticism. But I sort of don't see that as something that impacts my ability to be able to help them through this process. So long, the person has to be somewhat open-minded. I think I had one person who was refusing to close his eyes because he didn't want to close his eyes and didn't want to go through the induction process. I was just like, you're just wasting our time. We have to go through the induction. If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. So I've had a couple of moments like that over my career. But generally, confidence-wise, it's not something I'm lacking. I've been fortunate. So it was just like, oh, cool, I get to show someone else this cool thing. And if they're skeptical, they're going to talk to their friends about it even more, because they haven't gone from it was good to it was good. They've gone from this sounds like something I don't believe in to, wow, this has impacted me. I see them as even more vocal supporters.
What do you believe are the essential elements of a really successful hypnosis session?
So for me, the key thing is rapport.
Yeah.
So rapport with the client, and them understanding that this is teamwork for us, helping you understand why you're feeling a certain way, rather than an I will help you understand. It's we're working together to try and discover something that can impact and change your life. The second part is a willingness. So on my side, a willingness to be very assertive and aggressive into getting them to the place they want to go to, even if they don't want to get there. So when I'm working with a client, I don't accept the I don't knows very easily. So what's next? I don't know. Really, what's next? Lauren, what's next? What was the next thing that happened? So I'll be very firm, and I think there's a level of firmness that I have in my sessions that most hypnotherapists don't follow this type of approach. And I think that's important. And then obviously all of the reframing work that you're doing, and then the future pacing work. So sort of building that into that same process. And typically with the push towards the initial sensitizing events, the emotional release, which is a big part of the sessions that I do. I know not all hypnotherapists follow regression, but personally, that's the work that I do. It's, deep emotional releases in the vast majority of the sessions. That certainly that's my aim.
In your experience working, this is obviously not restricted to just hypnotherapists and hypnotists. But what do you find to be the most common kind of mindset roadblocks that exist that stop people from achieving their full potential?
I would say fear of failure, fear of success,
Yeah.
and all of those linked to self-worth. Am I lovable? Am I good enough?
Mhm.
So I'd say at the root of almost every issue, if you dig deep enough, it comes down to self-worth.
I
It
agree.
just presents in different ways in different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's sort of the core of everything.
When people present with an I'm not good enough kind of shame message that exists there, what kind of approach would you talked about regression there, but what kind of things would you work with them on in order to get them to move past that I'm not good enough?
Well, again, the majority of the work is regression or parts therapy.
Hmm.
Um, so in that instance, I'd be asking them, how do they know that they don't feel good enough? What does that feel like physically? I would take them through an effect bridge to different memories where that's been a part of their life. And typically we end up at somewhere between the age of 3 and 8, with a parent criticizing them in some way or someone in some position of authority, making them question themselves. And then we work through those memories. But because of the nature, the way that I design my sessions, virtually all of these issues will be dealt with in that sort of way. There is suggestion, there is metaphor, but for me, the key is really understanding why the person believes this fact about themselves at a subconscious level, and then reframing that for them, as I say, whether through parts or whether through regression.
What were you doing prior to mindset coaching? What was your life prior to hypnosis?
So, I mean, I'd worked in investments,
Hmm.
so investment property, and then solar energy and renewable energy investments. So it was a completely different world. So it was something where I was expecting to continue doing that, through my life, with hypnotherapy being a skill that's quite fun to help friends and family. And then it changed quite dramatically as the hypnotherapy became, more dominant. It just became a natural move to make, to say that actually I think this is the right direction for me to move forward. Yeah, and then sort of made that shift, but it certainly didn't come from a traditional therapy background prior to working in mindset.
Were there any aspects of what you were doing in that previous roles that you brought into what you do now?
Um, a lot of the things that I'd done historically, sort of even from when I was a kid, my uncle had a local family sports shop that I used to work in, and then I was working in property sales, then investment sales, then, as I say, renewable energy investments, which was effectively sourcing land for them to build solar energy farms and wind farms and things. All of those things were rapport based.
Mm.
So everything was public facing and everything was about building rapport and understanding people and what their needs were. So although it's a very different subject, um, the building of rapport and relationships, again, I just feel is extraordinarily important,
Mm.
with the hypnotherapy sessions themselves. So I think that's where, if there's any crossover, that's where the crossover was.
What advice would you then give any new hypnotists or hypnotherapists starting out that are wanting to step into this career? Um, what would you say as a word of wisdom from Elliot to give to them?
I would say niche very heavily
Mhm.
initially. The things that you have to remember, that I think I was very, very early on utilizing the internet for sessions. So 10 years ago, from the beginning of my client sessions, they were on Skype.
Mm.
I would see a few people. I had an office in Vegas, but I would see very, very few clients in person. Most of the time, I was niching very heavily into a specific subject
Mhm.
and then opening myself up to a worldwide market.
Mm.
And I think the mistake that the majority of new hypnotherapists make is that they say they can be everything to every person.
Yeah.
Um, and then also, most hypnotherapists, certainly prior to COVID, had a strong preference for doing the sessions in person.
Mm.
And that limits your market by 100 million
By a
times or
global
something. Yeah,
scale, yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it's so so I mean, I would really say that was the key to the success I have, is that I was willing to niche in a very extreme way initially,
Mhm.
and became a well-known expert in that particular niche and field. And then I wasn't looking to see people in person or to dominate a local market. The local market's never been relevant to me in any way. All that's relevant is how many potential people there are who want my service in the world, and what amount of money are those people willing to pay for the person who's the best at that specific niche. And that drove my business forward.
Mm. You also have an app called Prime Mind.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we made an iPhone and Google application. So just on your telephone, hypnotherapy app. And I've been fortunate. One of my clients had really serious success, so I started working with him, and he basically became the best poker player in the world. He won $30 million, and he was kind enough to attribute a lot of the success he had to the work we'd done. So, extraordinary advertising for me, and a nice shift in life for him as well. And from that stage, he was like, look, I want more people to be able to experience hypnotherapy and the mindset work you do. What could we put together as a product where you could share this with more people but make it affordable for them?
Mm.
And we decided that an app was the right way to go. So we produced a hypnotherapy app. It's got around 300 audios in it that I've
Jeez,
recorded.
that's amazing.
Yeah, so a
Yeah,
lot.
that's comprehensive. Yeah.
And we've got, I think, 40 of them are free.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can pay for an upgrade to be able to access the other ones. But the idea was to just introduce hypnotherapy to the wider public. It's called Prime Mind because a lot of it's specific about setting yourself up for a certain event, playing a sport, your working day, making a sales call, networking event, even going to sleep. But it's all setting yourself up for something. Um, and then the other thing we did with it is a lot of the stuff sort of for children, or like we put in study things, so like for kids struggling with exam stress, say, and we just made those free for everyone. So it was like, if there's something where we can help people who might not have the money, obviously teenagers might be struggling, we just put the study stuff in for free so that, yeah, we can try and help some people along the way as well.
How much have you noticed the recent COVID pandemic impacting on people that you see?
um I'm It's strange, it varies.
Mm.
The reality of the world that I'm in, with the level of success and wealth that most of my clients have, most of them made more money.
Mm.
Like, so they had a more successful year in COVID, because they were well placed, in order to be able to sort of negotiate the way through the year in a strong way economically. But there's certainly been a lot of stresses, fears of mortality. A lot of people have had family members die, so the emotions have been much higher. But in the category of people I'm working with, it hasn't had the negative effects that I would expect most hypnotherapists would be seeing with their clients, just because of the social economic status of my client base.
Mm. I guess if people wanted to reach out at you at all, how would be the best way that they could get in touch with you?
So I've got a website, elliotroe.com.
Hmm.
So that's the easiest. And we've obviously got the app as well, Prime Mind, that has its own website. And then I've got a couple of podcasts. I have Prime Mind podcast, which is high performance stuff, and then I have a poker specific one called the Mindset Advantage podcast. But I don't know how relevant that will be to many of the listeners. But if you love poker as well, randomly,
How did you get to poker? Because I did notice that when I had a look online, that, there's a lot of conversations that you have around poker, and it's a fascinating area. But how did you come to be there?
it was my initial niche. So like I said, I helped some golfers. I had a
Mm.
friend in the poker industry, who'd said, this is, if someone gets stressed on a final table, it costs them $1 million. Do you think you could help people with that stress? And I felt I could.
Mm.
And then I just offered free sessions for poker players for around 3 months, 4 months, and they saw the amount of money they make went up. And from there, I was able to get a foothold in the industry. I was the first person doing this within the industry. There's
Mm.
now quite a few people who's following the footsteps of it. But that was how I gained traction in that niche. And I do feel a bit like I was saying earlier, there are a huge number of niches that that haven't been exploited yet by hypnotherapists,
Hmm.
and they just aren't covered. So, I would really recommend someone new really think about, how stressed do surgeons get, how stressed do lawyers get, how stressed do real estate agents get. Like,
Yeah.
is there something that you have a background in, a skill set in, where you can find this niche that might, as I say, when we're looking at a global scale, might scale your hypnotherapy business exponentially versus, I do weight loss, I do sphere of spiders, I do et
I
cetera,
think
et cetera, et
that's
cetera.
such excellent advice because so many hypnotherapy students graduate and they do become initially, I guess, generalists in many sense
Mm,
and try to help everyone until they realize that potentially trying to help everyone is, I think, um, not necessarily productive for them. I think they also experience a bit of overwhelm from that
mm.
because there's this fear of what if someone comes in with a problem that I can't help them with,
And you've
or that I
advertised that you can
don't
help
know
with
enough
anything.
about,
Yeah.
or but if you are, you're absolutely right. If you have an awareness of what it's like to be a lawyer or to be a real estate agent or any of those sort of things and the stresses and challenges that come with that, that would be the obvious place to niche down into.
Yeah, as I say, I think that's the route to success in this sort of industry is becoming an expert and doing all the things to become an expert in a very narrow field. If I was personally looking, let's say, I don't know, I was an angry person, I was looking for someone to work with anger. If there was someone who only worked on anger versus people who worked on lots of things, 100% of the time I would pick the person who's a specialist in that one area. And I just think it's missed by many people in the industry.
I absolutely agree. And it's interesting because in my experience, even if you niche in one area, you are still going to get inquiries
Oh
about
yeah.
everything else that happens there. How often does that happen for you, and how often do you accept things that are outside of that niche
Um,
area that you
well,
do?
I moved on from the niche after about 5 or 6 years. I was getting recommended to, like I said, professional athletes, business owners, etc. So now I'm probably 70% outside of poker, 30% in poker now. Um, but everyone's high performance.
Mm,
So they're looking to improve in an area typically for financial gain. So they're looking to improve in their career in some way. Sometimes it's about happiness because they've already reached their financial goals,
mhm,
but it's a very specific person who's going to find me. Typically, they're top 100 in the world trying to reach top 10 or top 10 trying to reach number one. Like that. That's basically it. When people come, I still get people reaching out, hey, can you help me quit smoking? And I'll just say, look, this is really, it is not worth paying me the money I'm going to charge you to help you quit smoking.
yeah,
There's plenty of people that can help you with this area. Or if it's weight loss, I'll say, look, this isn't a specialist area for me. Really, I'm helping people trying to improve their performance. There are people I've trained other hypnotherapists, and I'll recommend somebody who I feel is a better fit. But it doesn't really make much sense for me to look outside of my lane at all. And I feel that, you know, people who are working with me are paying me what they're paying me because of my specialist knowledge in a very specific niche and my experience in that niche. I'm not comfortable doing something completely random and saying that they would need to pay me the same money for my time.
mm. I'm letting the question form in my head here at the moment. Um, Given that you've had such tremendous success where you are right now as a
Hmm.
hypnotherapist, as a mindset coach, where do you see the future going for you? What is there left for you that you wish to achieve in this career?
I'd like to grow the app to helping. I think we've got probably 250,000 downloads at the moment. I
Hmm.
would like to get to multiple millions because that's where I feel I'm helping the most people with, it's not so much about the financial success of it, but more that's where I can impact the most people. I enjoy training other hypnotherapists in the way that I work on with this modality,
Hmm.
and seeing that utilized by other people. And then at some stage, I'll probably write a book. But it's not. It's really just about having interesting stories and being a part of interesting stories when it comes to the one-to-one coaching, because if you see people had people take, start a company, work with them all the way through to the sale of their company, or someone coming up and winning a UFC belt, or someone breaking a world record. Like, these are really fun stories to be a part of. And it doesn't really get boring because the story is always different. So, so it's just more of the same, but then hopefully having an impact on more people, with these other products and services that aren't necessarily linked to me selling my hours of my day, but having stuff out there that can, be in everybody's pocket.
How often do you do your training for hypnotherapists?
So I don't run a formal training program.
Hmm.
Typically, I just work with already qualified hypnotherapists, and we do bi-weekly sessions where I'll sometimes bring on other hypnotherapists with different views to mine,
Hmm.
to give them lectures, and then I do some one-on-one training with them. But it's not a specific course. It's not something I market, or there's no web page. It's typically people I know who are looking to work with me specifically to move into performance work, rather than the typical niches within hypnotherapy.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, Elliot, thank you so much for your time today. There's been so many things that you've said that have really triggered, I think, a lot of thoughts from people that are listening in on this. And certainly, if people wish to get in touch with you, I know you mentioned before the way they can do that.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time today.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me on the show.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you next time.